Hello everyone, this is Tim. This is going to be a video response to Andrew Wood's video about group size. And I wanted some time to think about it and come up with a better response video to it, and I just haven't had the time lately to really do that many videos. So group size. He talked a lot about different people, the different number of players for different types of games, and he was asking what kind of genres of games and we like to play, and do we have different numbers of players we like in those games? And I do. If I'm running rules light, like old school fantasy games, traditional, human-centric type games, I'll allow up to 8 people, because most of the players, most of the characters have retainers, so there's all kinds of people in the game anyway. So what's the difference between having retainers do it versus having players do it? And because, I don't know, the rules light games in general, I tend to be able to have more players because there's less talking about mechanics, and it's just more about the actions and the actual role playing. And in those kind of games, all the players and characters are pretty much grouped together for the most part, so it seems to be all right. For more modern D&D games, 3.5, Pathfinder, those sorts of things, even like even older games that just have a little more crunch to them, I seem to max out at 6 people. 6 people is a good number for me, because there's more rules questions and you have to look up things in the books more often. Sometimes players will say that's not how things are, so you have to go and check. So 6 people seems to be pretty good for me, even less, 5 people probably. For Firefly is a good example of like a sci-fi game where most of the time all the characters are just trapped on the ship, and a lot of the things that happen in the campaign is actually the relationship of the different characters with one another and how they get along, if they have any gripes, if they have any disagreements. It's more mission-based. So for me, Firefly, I can run that up to upwards of 8 people, and I just think it's more interesting. There's more, character and character interaction in those types of games. And when I run Firefly, I don't usually use the Serenity RPG, although it's a great RPG because it has a lot of the fluff from the series, and I'll try to port some of those things into, like, I've run Firefly with BRP, I've run it with World of Darkness, new and old, and those sort of systems just seem to work better for me. So that's what I usually do. But 8 people for Firefly. For other sci-fi games, I would probably limit that to like 6, and depending on how crunchy the rules are, maybe less. For World of Darkness games, this is something that I've had to reconsider. For a long time, I thought World of Darkness games, I could have, 6 players, sometimes even more, depending on how heavy I was actually using the rules. Like I ran a midnight setting with the World of Darkness rules, and they were very rules light. It was mainly just stats and skills, and you just rolled dice. And I think I had upwards of up to 8 players in that game. But when you're talking about World of Darkness as like actual games like Vampire the Masquerade or Requiem, Werewolf, Hunter, those sorts of games, I've reconsidered. I think 4 players for me is the max that I'm going to start doing for any of those sorts of games. And the reason I think I've come to this conclusion is those games are normally more about personal horror, personal issues, and the characters in those games seem to break apart more often. Do solo adventures, go off on their own, they split the party. And even the word party isn't really there. It's more of a solo thing. It's more of a solo story, even though you do interact with the characters from time to time. So, World of Darkness games, I'm going to start limiting myself to 4. And that can be kind of tough too, because if you're not comfortable with running a game for a lot of players, and let's say you have a weekly group that has 6 people in it, would I run a World of Darkness game for them? Perhaps. And the reason there's the perhaps is because of attendance. I've talked a lot in previous videos how I seem to have, especially in the past, I've had a lot of groups where attendance was a really big issue. And as you get older and your players have families, they have kids, there's just a lot more responsibility in their lives, and there's a lot more things that are, clamoring for their free time. So I found that even though I've given these numbers for the different types of games, I'll pad my numbers sometimes depending on how good the attendance is for a group. So let's say I'm running a modern D&D game where my max is 6 players. Maybe I'll have 7 players, and I just kind of expect one person for the most part to miss a session every week. It'll be different people, of course, unless there's one really flaky player. But other games I do that too. Firefly, I think when I ran that, I think I had like 10 people, but like 2 or 3 people, sometimes more, would miss. So it still worked out good. And the reason some of you might want to pad your numbers as well, if you have a lower number of people in your weekly group, like let's say you only have 4 people in your weekly group, and 2 or 3 of them cancel, you can't play your game anymore unless you do some sort of solo game. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So other games, I guess for story games, these are like your independent, like indie games, story games like Dogs in the Vineyard, Polaris, those sorts of games. I tend to like to have less people. 4, sometimes up to 6. Dogs in the Vineyard, I've run it with 6 players, and that seemed to work out fairly well. Although I did pretty much run it rules light, and I didn't use all of the mechanics, but it's an interesting system, and I've talked about that before. So as a GM, you have to ask yourself the question, how many players can you handle, and does that change depending on what game you're running? And for me, it does seem to change. I can get through running a game with more people than I'm comfortable with, but I find that it adds to my GM burnout, it adds to my stress, and it reduces my enjoyment of the game for the most part. But there's the other aspect too. If I have fewer players, I get uncomfortable, I get weird, I don't know if I really like the idea of a solo game. If I have a group of 6 people and 5 of them call off and I have one person show up, I'll probably do something else. Maybe play like a board game, maybe some old Avalon Hill war game or something like that. I don't know, just solo gaming bugs me. I think it's just the lack of social interaction between the players that I tend to enjoy. I like that social atmosphere, that social interaction between the players. So I think that's why it bugs me. But I'm willing to try to push through that in the future. People have been talking about preludes and just how solo gaming is different and has its different pros and cons. And I think I just need to look at those and just basically try it out and try to get used to it, try to incorporate it in future games. But I don't know, that's just something I was thinking about. There's also other things with group size. Sometimes I've had players invite friends that are from out of town and they come in for a weekend, and instead of canceling, they bring their friend along with them. So sometimes I don't always know how many players I'm going to have. Sometimes I'm going to expect 6, and I actually had it one time where 2 people invited friends in and they didn't really let me know. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a big table. So what I try to do is to have a few pre-generated characters just sitting in my binder somewhere, so that if I have unexpected people show up, they don't have to sit there and drag out the game for half hour, an hour, however long it takes them to make their character while everyone else is waiting. I just throw them a piece of paper, try to fit them in the story somehow quickly, and then just move on. And then hopefully they enjoy their night, and their friends are glad that they brought them along. So that happens sometimes as well. So as a general rule for me, 4 to 6 people for most games. There are some exclusions or some games where I'll go up to 8 players if it's like rules light, or for whatever reason Firefly just seems to work well for me. So that's pretty much it, everyone. Let me know if you think there's a certain number of people that you're comfortable running with. You might have already left a response to Anders' original video, but that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you guys later.